Are we on?
Yes.
We're on. Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is the board meeting of the South Coast British Columbia Transportation Authority Board. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands today of the Lower Mainland Coast Salish people, and we'd like to give thanks for their hospitality on these lands where we have the opportunity to work and play and grow and learn, and we thank them for that. Okay, so we can call this meeting to order. We have the consent agenda, item 1.1. This one had a chance to read this material. Anyone want to take anything out?
Aye.
Yes.
Letter.
Oh, the letter I. All right then. That too. Yeah. Great. Okay. And can I have a motion then to approve? Thank you. Seconded. Thank you. Okay. Item 1.2. That's Transportation Authority Police Board of Directors approves the receipts for information, the items on the consent agenda as item 5. To item 1.3, and that's item 5, and that's the letter from Ecom, George?
Yeah, all I wanted to do is just bring it out because in the public session in particular, it's a small matter where we need to commend the dispatchers within the organization and bring it to the attention because of the PNE riots.
Yeah.
And the way the probably not just dispatchers, but I would assume the entire came together and helped out your folks in particular. And just really, again, I think as a board, sometimes those things kind of slip between the cracks where we take the view of really big stuff, but the day-to-day things that are done and the work that's done by, obviously, the civilian staff is hugely important. And as a result, I want to make sure that we acknowledge that. And there is some other work, I guess, that's been done to all of that through the agency as well.
Yes, and they've certainly been informed of that letter, and as well, even our patrol members, we sent nine members to assist with that. And then we were also in contact with VPD Car 10 and the staff sergeant and CO on watch. So we've recognized them certainly for the efforts, and our friends at VPD certainly recognize the efforts of both our dispatchers and members in support of that line. So.
Yeah, that was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was excellent, and I think it just shows the continued relationships that we have with our JPD partners. And the integration and the willingness of all law enforcement to help on that.
So I just wanted to bring it up for information and just recognition, that's all.
Thank you, George. Okay, does anybody have anything else they'd like to talk to in this time? Do we have a public information? Not today.
Do we need a motion on item R?
Oh, yes, we do. Thank you. Thank you, Murray. Thank you, George. The challenge of middle-aged eyes. Okay. Item 2.1, we've got a presentation on digital evidence management system from Stephanie Troy Henez. Please correct that pronunciation. If it was wrong, I apologize.
Good morning. Everybody. Good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you. I've met a few of you in the room, but for those of you that haven't met, I'm Staff Sergeant Troy Henez. And I'm currently seconded to the Digital Evidence Management System implementation team. So thanks for the opportunity to come and speak to you this morning and give you a bit of an update on where we're at and where we expect to be in the coming months. So, Kurt, Taryn. There we go. So a couple things I'm going to touch on today is what we're doing in terms of supporting the provincial implementation group. We're currently working with that. No, hang on a second here. I'm going to speak up my speaking notes here. I think I clicked it twice by accident. Yeah, so I'll speak to our work with Prime Corp and Axon as we look to resolve some issues with respect to our ability to view TransLink subsidiary video within the DEMS system itself, because that's been a big issue for us. I'll talk about our delivery to our training. It's on track to be delivered to the civilian and sworn members starting in March of 2023. I'll touch on our policy and best practices draft documents that are currently in the works. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about some end-to-end analysis that we've been working on for a number of months now with our information management section and how we've been able to identify and we look forward to achieving some efficiencies in how we're doing business in that section. So, next slide. Nobody else is going to control this right now. Look up for that one. There we go. So, I'll speak to the provincial implementation project.
There we go.
The Transit Police were involved in a pilot project at the provincial level, and that has transitioned into the full implementation of the DEMS. So we continue to sit with Prime Corp and Axon at the provincial table, and we also work alongside our other policing partners at Vancouver Police, Abbotsford Police, Victoria Police, and there's also representation from the RCMP on that provincial implementation team as well. So primarily what we do at that table is we continue to look at joint solutioning issues that are in the master services agreement that Axon must deliver in the provincial DEMS program, and we troubleshoot issues, and then through Prime Corp we bring those issues to the table, we joint solution, and then we give that to Axon so they can go back and they can try and achieve the functionality that we're looking for to be able to deliver to our frontline officers across the province, really, is where this is going. So that's the provincial piece. And Axon is committed to giving us certain things in certain quarters of the coming 18 months, dealing with different functionality issues that came out of the pilot project. And so we're hoping that most of these will be in place when we roll out into our full implementation of DEMS coming up in March. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, one of the biggest issues that we have is the ingestion of CCTV. It's been super important to the Transit Police because virtually all police agencies in the province, we ingest the largest amount of CCTV data, whether it be the Coast Mountain Bus Company, SkyTrain, or ProTrans over at Canada Line. Virtually all of our investigations have a piece of digital evidence in the form of CCTV that we are requesting. So it's really important to us that we are able to view that within the DEMS system itself, okay? And right now, the DEMS system has a codec that allows it to play videos with various file types. For the longest time, the file types of the subsidiaries within TransLink do not play within the DEMS. So it's problematic from the perspective that it forces the officers to have to download that video outside of the DEMS itself to view it on a third-party player. And it really defeats the purpose of the DEMS in the sense that the DEMS has a really robust audit trail in there, and really we're looking to maintain the continuity of that digital evidence from ingestion to disclosure to Crown end to end. So every time we have to break that continuity, it's problematic. So we've been supplying Axon with a number of different file types so they can work towards resolving those issues. And I'm happy to say that as of their updated release at the end of October, we're now able to view SkyTrain video and ProTrans video. So we're making some significant progress in that regard. So that's a real big deal for us. And that's going to be a huge time saver for the officers looking to view that video as they're doing their investigations. Next slide, please. So from a training perspective, the implementation team is on target to deliver the training starting in March of 2023. We'll start with the civilian employees of the information management section because they're the folks that are going to have to support the officers once they start actually using the system out on the road. So we'll start that in March, and we will continue that through April the 15th. And then we're on target to train between April 17th and May the 5th of 2023 to roll that out to the rest of the operational officers of the organization. We have partnered with the Justice Institute of BC. They have a large computer lab up there, so we're able to get, I think, 24 or 26 officers per session in there. And what we'll be able to do is be able to give them the theory, and then we'll be able to back that up with some scenario-based, hands-on opportunities. So the officers will be able to work through the system, practice gathering evidence on their phones through the app itself, and then managing it on the back end within evidence.com within the test environment. So when they go out the road, we expect they'll be able to manage, having gone through the various scenarios that we're going to present to them. And once those officers are trained, they'll be able to start using the system right away. It'll be up and running. And we currently have about 35 or 40 members that are currently using the system from the pilot period, and they've been a huge help to try and identify different issues along the way, and then really helping to shape what the implementation is going to look like. Next slide, please. One of the biggest pieces of work has been around policy and best practices. So we've been drafting that document for a number of months. I can tell you all that we're at a point now where we're building on our existing evidence policy, and we're bringing in all of the language around the digital piece, right? It's not just physical evidence, but the digital piece as well. So that's in draft at this point here. I can tell you that we are now at a point where our current language is now before the greater policy review section, so folks like Oscar and Risk and other operational representatives. So we're looking at the language and we're wordsmithing it and making sure that it's on point. So we expect that will continue probably right up into and beyond the actual implementation, because there's just certain pieces that we're looking at as kind of a working document right now, but we want as much in place as we can by the time we roll out in March. Parallel with that is a best practices document, so it's not really policy-based stuff, but it'll be a guide to officers in terms of best case scenario, how to best capture digital evidence in the field. An example of that might be the one that I always use when I'm talking to people is, if you're dealing with a stolen bicycle, we don't need 15 pictures of a stolen bicycle, right? Because we want to explain to the officers that, we want you to capture as much evidence as you can at the front end. Make sure you're not over-capturing. And I use the bike as an example only because, if you capture 15 images of that bike, that's 15 images that you have to manage on the back end. So you want to have an awareness of the extra work you're going to have to put on the back end as well, and find that balance of what you need. So that's where we foresee the best practices document, is providing that guide to the officers as they capture evidence out in the field. Next slide, please. And this piece of work here, the workflow analysis and efficiency, that has been, frankly, the biggest piece of work that we've done to this point. And what it's done is it's looked at what data do we currently store in the records management system and within the Prime system itself, and what will we store in the DEMS system in terms of digital evidence. Will there be some things that we store in both systems, and then how does that work in terms of the long-term vision of disclosure of Crown? And we, myself and the team, have worked with the IMS section for, I want to say, the better part of a year, literally examining every process of how we take every little piece of paper and every little process within what we do in policing and how it's pushed through that section. And we found a number of dare I say, inefficiencies, but that's the positive piece coming out of this, because where we found inefficiencies, we've been able to now circle back and look at making those processes efficient, eliminating, multiple storage locations, because that's a real big thing with the DEMS. We don't want evidence stored in multiple locations. We want it stored in one location for continuity. So we have looked at achieving those efficiencies, and we've now met with the operations folks once already, and we're going to meeting scheduled next week to now look at what can we implement now before the DEMS is on board. And we've all got a whole bunch of stuff too that we'll be prepared to make changes on once we step off with the DEMS itself. So I think the efficiency piece is probably the piece that I'm most proud of as part of our team, because it's going to save work for the support staff, and ultimately it'll save some work for the officers at the front end too. So anytime that we can find efficiency, that's a good thing. So yeah, so that's my overview. Happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
We have already touched on it. What data are we required to be fully operational with DEMS?
So frontline policing is August of 2023, so we'll be well within that, absolutely.
Yeah, Troy, really good presentation. I'm just wondering, like, for some of the board members that may not be as familiar with it, could you just give a quick 101 on what DEMS means and what it will mean for an officer on the front line, what they'll be able to do now that they can't do previously?
Yeah, absolutely. And forgive me, there was pieces to this that perhaps I made an assumption that I shouldn't have, that you have more understanding of the system than perhaps you do. So the DEMS system is predicated on an app that will be on the officer's phones. It's called the Capture app. So the officers will be able to capture photos, audio, video, and there's also a fourth component to that app, which is a citizen invite. So if you were a victim of a break-and-enter, or you perhaps observed somebody committing a mischief and you're facing property and you captured a photo or video of that, I could send you a link, and then you would upload your video or your photo to that link, and then it would upload it directly into the cloud system, which is the DEMS itself. So the efficiency piece is the fact that officers don't have to carry multiple devices with them. Okay, so they're always carrying their phones with them. They don't have to carry a digital audio recorder to take a witness statement. They don't have to carry any other devices with them. The app itself for frontline policing, I think, is going to be a great tool, right? So we all go to scenes, we need to take photos, we need to take witness statements. All of those pieces of evidence that we gather in any investigation doesn't need any extra management. From the app itself, we will upload it right into the cloud. It's a cloud-based system, super secure with Axon's technology, and it's uploaded directly into the cloud. And then the officers utilize the evidence.com, they sign into a secure area, and then they'll manage their evidence on the back end. And not to go too deep into it, but there will be naming conventions that need to be applied to all of the evidence itself in order to be compliant with the Police Crown Memorandum of Understanding for the purposes of ultimately disclosing to Crown in the long term.
And could you also explain, it's a provincial initiative?
Yes.
Absolutely. We have a few board members that have just come on board in the last 6 months, so it would be helpful if you could give us that background.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a bit of a history. This has come to be over about the last 3 or 4 years, even longer perhaps in terms of discussion at the senior executive level of government and within the BC Prosecution Service. And as we move forward and digital evidence becomes more and more of an issue in terms of disclosure and core and tracking continuity and such, this is kind of the long-term culmination of a lot of discussion on how do we manage digital evidence, how do we disclose it to Crown, and how do we account for its continuity. And so the Axon DEMS system looks to achieve all of those things ultimately at the end, right? So now we're in a position where the provincial government has mandated the DEMS system. There's an order council in place which says that all police agencies must be online to DEMS by certain dates. So we're working towards achieving that now, and then once everybody's online, the long-term goal, once it's in place, will be the disclosure of all of our prosecution files to BC Prosecution Service electronically through the DEMS system as well. So we will send it electronically, and they will receive it electronically at that end. And part of the most important piece is the audit trail. So if anything is ever questioned about when something was ingested, who touched it, who viewed it, who was in there, it's all accounted for in a robust audit trail. So hence my point about the CCTV, it's why it's super important that we don't want to have to pull something out to view it. We want to view it within the system itself, because that way we don't have to break that audit trail.
Right.
Great. Hi, Troy. Great presentation. I'm one of the new members on the board. When you used the example of the 15 pictures of a bicycle, and you're saying that the challenge will be at the back end of it, can you kind of explain why the 15 pictures that one takes of a bicycle, it creates a challenge on the back end?
Yeah, absolutely. So when the officers take pictures out in the field, the app is, it's all based on their file number. So their file number within the Prime system, the RMS, is associated to their evidence in the DEMS. So they are linked forever, okay? So oftentimes what the members will do is they'll use a common name. So they'll choose just a friendly name when they're naming their evidence in the app itself, okay? So Troy's bike, okay? The serial number of Troy's bike might be what I uploaded as,
Right.
But that's not a naming convention that could ever be sent to the prosecution service. Okay, so but it means something to me. So when I go into the back end, when I log into evidence.com, I then need to apply a naming convention to that evidence so that everybody that's looking at it understands what that evidence is and what it represents. So I would have to use a specific naming convention, and the naming conventions are very rigid, and they're in place through a committee that's established them, that's had representation from both the Crown's office and senior police executive throughout the region. So I would have to apply that naming convention on the back end. So where I take a bunch of photos that may not be necessary, that takes time and is the efficiency on the backside, okay? The other piece to that is like even when gathering physical evidence, right? A lot of factors come into play. Experience of the officer comes into play, knowing what to capture as evidence, knowing what not to capture as evidence comes into play. So that's the efficiency piece on the back end, right? So we want officers to gather as much evidence as they can that's appropriate to grab, but we also don't want to gain efficiencies in one area and then lose them in another because there's no net gain there, right? So.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any security concerns with the app on officers' phones, or is Axon taking care of that?
No, it's a super secure system, and I can do my best to explain this to you. I'm the operational police guy, I'm not the technical person, but what I can tell you is that the IP address that's associated to all of the communication is whitelisted, okay, which means that even all of our officers' phones are IP whitelisted to our department's IP address, so you cannot access the system from your home, for example, or an officer can't access it from their home because their home IP address wouldn't be whitelisted.
Right.
So there's a lot of security features in place to make sure that it cannot be accessed. And it's, as I mentioned, it's a cloud-based storage thing as well. So and what I understand about cloud-based storage, it's about the most secure storage option you have, and that's why we're trying to get away from storing things on network drives and external hard drives and such, because they just inherently are not secure. So
As secure, without getting too much into security, because it's an open meeting.
Yeah.
But
also with Axon, have they been responsive? Is the original timeline being met, and you feel that?
Yeah, like I say, it's as I said, we speak as a committee, representative with Prime Corp, right? So Prime Corp is the entity that actually is responsible for managing that relationship. So it's certainly not the transit police. We are just a committee representative at the provincial table. But I would say, generally speaking, from my perspective, we've had good response from Axon, and they've been good to deal with.
Great. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Troy, for your presentation. Interested in sort of admissibility down the line. Like you mentioned, different ways that evidence comes to you. So you could have it in physical form, the old-fashioned way. You've got cell phones, dash cams. You mentioned CCTV. So have there been challenges then when you get to the Crown, like where somebody sees something from outside? What are some of the things that keep you up at night around keeping that chain of custody, I guess, or whatever it's called, in terms of evidence secure? Because it seems to me that there's possibilities that can be made.
Yeah, so we have only just tested in the pilot period some of disclosure at Crown, so it really hasn't been tested to this point from the end-to-end ingestion, storage, and the DEMS, and then pushed through to Crown. Crown has a digital evidence system of their own. It's not the same as the police one, so they're actually still in the process of actually building the end-to-end communication linkage for the police system to the Crown system. So that actually hasn't gone through testing and such yet, right? So the police side is going to be in place certainly before the Crown side is in place. So I can't fully answer that question from that perspective, but what I can say is that I'm comfortable certainly with what our evidence is going to be, and ultimately police and Crown have the same objective in mind, and that is the end-to-end secure transfer of that evidence. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I was thinking, how is it received by Crown? So you're saying it's actually not getting there yet.
So they have a secure file transfer system now that they utilize, but that will not be the long-term solution to the transfer evidence. It will all be done within the police DEM system, communicating with their system. But they do have a secure file transfer system in place now that is encrypted in terms of the transfer of that evidence now.
And I just wanted to ask a second question. question, just about, I imagine that this is just top of mind all the time, it's quite live, you know, as it's evolving, technology evolves and whatnot. And I'm wondering about, you mentioned training, is it sufficient? You know, what are the needs in terms of making sure, it sounds like every member can know exactly, and non-board members, to manage this. So just concerned about, you know, future security issues and the maintenance of evidence. How would you rate, or what concerns might you have for the training as it's being implemented?
I think everybody that's gonna have access to the system, first of all, needs an individual license, right? So each one of those individual people are going to have training and understand how to use the system, and I think that's why my point about our training up the justice system on a computer lab. You're literally going to walk everybody through, you know, how to capture evidence, how to use it on your phone, how to upload it, how to manage it on the back end and apply naming conventions, and how to have it so that it is ready within your DEMS file, your investigative file in your DEMS. In terms of security, I don't have any particular concerns about the security of evidence once it's in the cloud, it's in the DEMS system itself. And as I say, we're looking to avoid having to bring it out of that DEMS system, because every time we bring it out of that DEMS system, then we need to worry about deleting it off of network drives and then managing it. So that's our ultimate goal, is to manage it as little as possible and have it all managed within the system itself. All of the staff, whether it be sworn or civilian, will all be trained on how to manage that system, and it will be explained to them that everything they do in the system is tracked and audited. So, you know, so in terms of, I'm not sure if that's where you're going, in terms of appropriate access or like that, no, it'll be clear both in policy and in practice that, you know what, if you don't have business in this, then
Thank you. It was a really good presentation. I just have one final question. So this project started, did you say 3 years ago, remind me, I think?
So it actually started in concept prior to that, and I wanted for perhaps some of the executives in the room to support me on this, but I believe it goes back to about 2017 in concept, and it was at I want to say it was at a judge's conference or something like that, and with senior executives of the government, and they started talking about how this had to come to be and how digital everything in our society is becoming more and more to the forefront. So how are we going to try and get ahead of this? Because I think we were a little bit behind it, so we're working to get where we need to be in terms of management of it.
And so and you said in your presentation, but I've forgotten, that the order in council was about 3 years ago?
So the order in council just came into place, I believe it was last summer.
Okay.
It was August of last year is when it came down, so that was post-pilot.
Okay.
Once they chose a vendor, so that was part of the problem, is that they chose Axon, once they had the vendor chosen.
Yeah.
The order in council came out and that directed that all police.
I see that.
Province would comply, yes.
And so when you say that we're going to be up and running in sounds like 8 months or so.
Yes.
And what's the kind of the whole life of this project, including what the Crown's going to do? Is that like another
It's a good question.
year or two?
We're not in a position to say when Crown is going to be up and running with their piece yet. And I would want to speculate because, I mean, we say 6 months, it could be longer, I don't know, right? But I know they were on target, I believe, to start testing their system by the springtime.
Right.
But there'll have to be some robust testing that's put in place before we go live for all the police in the region to be disclosing to the prosecution service for the victims. So how long that testing will be, I don't know.
Okay.
So it could be 6 months, could be a year, I'm not sure.
Sounds like an efficient way to collect evidence if it's just on the one device.
It is, yeah. No, it is. I think it's going to be a huge benefit to the frontline officers. You know, they'll be able to do what they need to do in the moment. And like I say, they'll have to handle that evidence less at the beginning. They won't be downloading from devices and transferring here and from there. It'll be one press to get it where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That was a really great presentation, very helpful. Any other questions? Thanks so much, Troy.
Thanks for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, pretty much on schedule. Anita, you're going to give the chief's report today.
I am, yeah, and so in wearing the chief's hat for the moment, I just wanted to welcome Inspector Barry Hicks for those of you that are new to the board. Barry is overseeing our PSO program and hasn't been at one of our meetings for a bit, so I just wanted to make sure that everyone is introduced to him. So Barry, new board members. And now we'll do all our names, you gotta repeat them back.
Thank you, Barry.
And so now I'm going to flip over to my other hat as the DCO, and Inspector Huber isn't here, so I'm going to give his squad update.
Okay.
And then I'll pass it over to the other inspectors for their updates. So it's been obviously a busy month for, well, not just us, but many agencies and some of the things that we've been participating in. So Constable Yang's funeral, obviously significant event for our RCMP brothers and sisters that we were proud to be there. We had over 80 sworn and civilian members from our agency. So a significant amount given what we had in terms of strength. So very proud to have all of us there. Solemn occasion and obviously a difficult one for all of us, but great for us to have been able to attend there. As well, we were in attendance at Aboriginal Veterans Day ceremony in Vancouver with our VPD partners. As well, we had 12 members attend to the Remembrance Day ceremonies here in New West, and I know many of us were in our own jurisdictions, in our own areas, taking part in those in those events as well. Sergeant Julian Ponsoon continues to do work in terms of planning, working with our VPD partners and TransLink, really in preparation for FIFA 2026, obviously timely as that's about to start in Qatar here on Sunday, day one, and I think that's the day the Chief will be flying there. So. As well, in terms of naloxone deployments, this year to date is 44. So in comparison to 2021, we had 47, so likely we'll surpass that. And again, significant efforts being made by our members, also the CLAs and SPAs to keep as many people alive with the toxic opioid crisis that we're dealing with here, and certainly significant with all of our law enforcement partners dealing with that. We've had a couple really successful NCO training days. So one was in-house here, where the focus was on really performance feedback, and also dealing with things like WorkSafe BC, short and long-term disability. So these are pieces that are kind of on that administrative side, but a lot of our NCOs weren't well versed in really how to do some of those things. So it ended up being a really great day for them to hear about kind of how to do some performance feedback, how to have good and more difficult conversations with their membership so that they can have greater engagement. And then there was a round table with members from our HR that were able to give them some really good advice on that. So, and that was really well received and had some really good interaction with our members. As well, on the flip side, we did a joint training day with our partners in Delta, Port Moody, and West Vancouver, and this is more focused on tactical training, dealing with situations when we have a emergency response team being called out, and how we support those events. So again, those were tabletop exercises that we were able to do with them in critical incident response. So again, always valuable to work with our partners in those types of training situations. I think that might be almost it for me. There have been significant, patrol files that we've been dealing with. Obviously, we just had the one regarding the riot. And the one that I will point out was just that happened on November 13th. I'm sure many people saw it on the news, where we had a male enter the guideway at Metrotown Station. Again, working with our VPD partners and the emergency response team. Two of our members were actually engaged in negotiations with that, and happy to say after 6 hours it came to a successful conclusion that we were able to have the male into custody and dealt with that. So an excellent job working with our VPD partners again.
And that's 6 hours outside?
Yes, and it was cold, yeah. And it was on November 13th, and yeah, all the members and obviously our VPD members were there. It was a significant event, that had also significant impacts to the transportation system with having to have a bus bridge. But yeah, so he was apprehended without incident, and it was a very successful conclusion to that. And on that vein, just to let you know that we now have 3 of our members that are part of the LMD crisis negotiation team. So they had been working with them, but they are now officially through that training, and they're now part of that.
What's the LMD?
Sorry, Lower Mainland District.
Oh, I see,
yeah.
of course, yes.
Too many acronyms that I always forget, yes, that not everyone knows, or I think now it's more Vancouver that refers to it, but it's still referred to as the Lower Mainland, so district team, so yeah, the crisis negotiation team. So, we've had our members involved in a number of those, through the years, and now they are officially on that team. So
Okay.
excellent for them, and very good for us in our integration with these teams. That is it from the squad side. So Inspector Huber, I'm going to pass it over to Inspector Chris Mullen on the investigative side.
Thanks.
Morning, everyone. I'll start off with the General Investigations Unit. So just a couple of investigations of note. So last year in October, a cell phone was dropped or left on a bench outside the Braid Street SkyTrain station. When a civilian picked it up and searched it, it was clear, as they were trying to identify the owner of the phone, that there was a number of what seemed to be child pornographic photos. So our GIU took custody of that investigation, and after several search warrants, they did identify a suspect, and in October of this year, they arrested that suspect for possession of child porn, executed a search warrant on his residence, Coquitlam, and as a result of an interview, there were admissions made that there will be more child porn evidence found on the device that we seized from the residence. So just working on disclosure on that investigation as forensic tech specialists examine the stuff that's been seized. Just in reference to a file that I did speak of last meeting pertaining to dangerous operation of a motor vehicle causing deaths. This is when a suspect fled from 2 of our CST members in July, and as a result of that, he collided with a vehicle, and unfortunately, the 2 young occupants within that vehicle passed away as a result of their injuries. Of note, though, since this incident, as we work on disclosure, it became evident that the suspect in that case continued to drive recklessly with total disregard to public safety in attempts to evade police apprehension. He's a prohibited driver. So through some follow-up investigation and collaboration with our Burnaby partners and Surrey partners, we were able to put together some subsequent charge recommendations and to Crown. And fortunately, Crown approved those charges as we work on disclosure, and he currently remains under house arrest with strict monitoring conditions. So that's moving along well. And GIU, they continue to work on a number of sex assault investigations and robbery files that are in the disclosure phases, and currently they are working on 2 robberies that have been linked to 1 suspect, and a number of conventional techniques such as surveillance, search warrants, and interviews are being done. Just to update on a couple of files in terms of results. So in January and February this year, we had a suspect committed a series of 7 assaults, 3 of which caused serious bodily harm. Just recently, that suspect pled guilty to all charges, so just a credit to GIU and the thoroughness of that investigation carried out. Also, we had a machete attack at the Burquitlam station earlier this year in March, and as of November 4th, both suspects pled guilty to all charges against them. So again, just a credit for to GIU for the thoroughness of their investigations in those 2 files. Our criminal intelligence unit, so they've been able to support operations, 14 transit police investigations, and 7 outside jurisdictional files where they've identified a suspect, a person of interest. Almost 100 intelligence bulletins were disseminated since the last meeting. They've attended the first airport intelligence unit meeting, and a lot of back and forth communication with our JPs on prolific offenders. Our crime suppression team, since the last meeting, they've had 55 self-generated files where 16 individuals wanted on various warrants were arrested. There are 3 instances where our CST located occupied stolen vehicles, and with assistance of Air One and our JPD partners, we were able to take all suspects into custody in all those instances without any incidents or trouble. We assisted Surrey RCMP with a kidnapping extortion investigation, and CST were able to locate the 2 suspects that were wanted in that case. And currently, our crime suppression team continues to contribute time and resources to the Lower Mainland gang conflict initiatives after identifying a target who is a real risk to public safety and uses the transit system a lot. So we're working in collaboration with both the Surrey RCMP and CFSU on that investigation, and it's progressing well. Those are the highlights for me.
Great, thank you very much, Chris. I'm going to pass it over to Inspector Suzanne.
Before you do, there was a lot of material and excellent, thank you. I'm just going to ask if anybody has any questions on it. Okay, we'll wait till the end then.
Okay, thank you. So updating on the operational support section today. So I've got 3 updates for you. The first involves the community engagement team. And it was deferred because of COVID, but we were able to host our first annual Waterfront CPC Volunteer Appreciation event. And that was on November 7th at the Italian Cultural Center. So we've had about 80 people in attendance, and I'd just like to recognize you, Sarah, for attending and being there, and absolutely Bill as well. So appreciate that representation. And it was really good. We had community partners who we're working with in attendance, and of course the volunteers who the night was really about. So we look forward to that being an annual event that we continue moving forward. Second is the K-9 unit. So building on the presentation from our last police board meeting, really looking to explore opportunities with our explosive dog detection team, how we can work more collaboratively with IPDS, and that's the Lower Mainland Integrated Dog Service. So recognition to board member and Assistant Commissioner Levy for sort of forging initial introductions. And I think there's some really good opportunities coming out of that we're talking about joint training opportunities, as well as coordinated response to the incidents in the Lower Mainland based on resource available for our respective teams. And the third and final is our target mobile enforcement team. So really looking to build on our strategic plan and opportunities to work with our partners across different JPDs to prevent crime. And we're going to be participating on December 3rd on Light Up the Night. And what that is a police road check educational campaign to keep our roadways safe. And that coincides with the National Impaired Driving Enforcement Day. So you will see representatives of Transit Police Team AD and perhaps others from our organization out with 200 other officers plus from the Lower Mainland and 19 agencies represented. So we're really happy to be a part of that initiative.
So can you tell me a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, they're looking at setting up from different organizations, and they will have kind of road checks across the Lower Mainland. It'll go from Fraser Valley and it'll go right into Vancouver. So different checkpoints along the way.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so it'll be an enhanced kind of presence that night and really educational, but there'll be an enforcement component to it as well.
Okay. Thank you. I interrupted you. Don't.
Not at all.
Stop you. Go ahead if there's any more.
No, unless there's any other questions.
So it sounds like there's a ton of partnerships and collaboration.
Again, it's obviously part of our strategic plan that we wanted to enhance those, and I think, all the work that we are doing, both from a community-based and an enforcement-based approach, is really paying dividends, and that we are really, we've got some really proactive NCOs that are building those relationships. We're doing a lot of joint forces or type of project-based work with them, and I think that's just, so much of policing is relationship-based. When you have the opportunity to have our members meet members from other jurisdictions, then it's much easier to pick up the phone and say, hey, can you give me a hand with something? Mm-hmm. And truly that is the basis of, of integrated models, or even looking at jointly working together, even if we're one agency. It really doesn't matter what stripe is on your pants. We are all out there for public safety. So if we can do that with our partners, partners and build those relationships. It's only beneficial for really public safety in the long run. And I think as part of our strategic plan, you know, from the operational side, we're all focused on that and building that. And I think it's certainly paying dividends by what we're reporting here today.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the public doesn't care what color your pants are.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can I have a comment?
Yes.
Me and I are working together, so the transit police work with, Peter and Joe in a couple of detachments in the Lower Mainland, so we can have better interoperability and build that communication. So we're just kind of building that process now. And, I'm hoping we need to get some legal documents, which we're both working on, but hopefully roll that out in January. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what you're talking about?
Yeah, I didn't want to jump the gun until we were more established, but now that you've opened up the door for me, certainly. So, one of the things that's come out of our pulse survey or internally is that our NCOs would like further opportunity for training. And obviously, my background being with the RCMP, I thought what a great idea is if we could have our NCOs partner with our RCMP members in jurisdictions that have a significant transit core, so thinking Richmond, Coquitlam, and Burnaby. We work with those detachments often, and we have significant transit. So by having our NCOs go out to those detachments and literally ride along with the NCO at the same level, sergeants or potentially our staff sergeants working with the watch commanders, just seeing how a different agency runs their calls, getting some experience there, and also being able to provide the RCMP membership and other members what we do at transit, what the hubs are and the transit points are in their jurisdictions. And again, relationship building, much easier. They'll be working the same squads as they do. So when they come back to our agency and they're working, then they'll know, you know, whoever they've worked with. And we're thinking about the integration of even potentially having somebody go out for, say, 2 blocks in Coquitlam and then potentially 2 blocks in Richmond, and then somebody else maybe a couple blocks in Richmond and then a couple blocks in Coquitlam, so that we can kind of maximize that networking ability and also just the knowledge base. It'll give our NCOs a little bit more exposure to, say, some higher level calls that we may not get at transit police, and just be able to have that dialogue so that they can learn from them. So, yeah, it's a great initiative. I certainly appreciate, ma'am, your efforts on that. And like I said, we've just got some hurdles with the legal and part to get through, but certainly something that hoping to see that we can initiate in the new year.
Okay, thank you. And I will say I was at the volunteer appreciation meeting, and it was fantastic. It was so great. The people I spoke to, young people who sat at my table, were just so dedicated and committed and thoughtful and hard. They were just, you know, my mom heart started beating for them. I'm so proud of them.
Yeah.
They were really kind and dedicated, and each one of them said, yeah, we volunteer, and they volunteered during the pandemic. They came out, the whole program started, for those of you who don't know that much, program started at Waterfront right in the middle of the pandemic, and these people came out, and they came down, and they went out, and they, you know, one woman said, oh yeah, we just go out and check on people, make sure they're okay. You know, do wellness checks, keep an eye out. They're phenomenal. It was a really good event, and I was so impressed with them and with the folks who organized it, and it was terrific.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add on that. Certainly a very committed volunteer group, and I think it's really great that we continue to encourage that volunteerism, because that's potentially how you brand yourselves and how the youngsters bring up. So I highly encourage that. It's great work that you guys done. I do have a question on the November 13th day, that now you mention it. I wasn't aware of the November 13th, but how I became aware of it was that when I was driving through a couple of the SkyTrain stations, it was really congested, and I was wondering what was happening. So my question is that, as much as that you guys are focused on the event that happened on the Metrotown station, of course, you could create a bottleneck on the other choke points. So how coordinated are the partners that you have to de-risk the other stations that are now getting all clogged up, and that becomes a risk because there's a traffic risk, there's the bus risk, and all that, and how do you coordinate with the, you know, the other elements where you need other people to help you with moving of mass of people, I guess.
Yes, so obviously TransLink is very responsive.
Yeah.
When our watch commander has to make that call, we need to shut down a station, they immediately put in a bus bridge. So that's what happened there. Patterson and Metrotown stations, the two middle points there, were shut down, and then they run a bus bridge. Obviously, these are incidents that happen, and so our members are there, but then we also have members that will flow through to those other points if there are any issues. And really, these are fluid situations that will be dealt with by the NCO that's on scene, if there's any concerns. And we also have our eyes and ears on the ground at those stations with our SLAs, or in this case, the SkyTrain attendants.
Yeah.
So if there's any issues, that there is, you know, an excessive amount of people at either of the stations due to the bus bridge, then we would have sent more members there. I don't have that as part of the briefings, and I don't believe so. It's something that we do in events like concerts. When we're in Vancouver, we'll be at the station on the platforms there when we have a huge influx of people. In this case, really TransLink is very efficient with their transit supervisors to ensure that there are bus links and bus bridges in place for as long as we need, and in this case, it was over 6 hours.
Yes.
Does that answer?
Yeah, and you're pretty comfortable with the fact that when your watch commander triggers that, they're really quite responsive in getting all the team together, because it's quite a bit of a logistics challenge to, in a minute, boom, let's get the bus service, let's get additional support staff, get the attendees, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so all of that is dealt with on the TransLink side.
Right.
Like, the
So understand.
supervisor will coordinate all of those.
Okay.
If they need further, like, law enforcement to be at either of the other stations due to crowd control, then they would give us a call. In that case, we're just dealing with really the enforcement issue or the subject that we're dealing with that's in the guideway, whereas the transit supervisor is really the person that's dealing with the bus bridge between Patterson and Metrotown to make sure that any people that are trying to take that SkyTrain have an ability to get around. So that really falls to our partners in TransLink and transit supervisor to do. And then if there's any issues with actual crowd control, then we can be there. And yes, it's absolutely, our NCOs, that's what they're trained for.
Right.
That's what some of the cross-training will be. This was the same situation that happened with the riots. The NCO made the call as to how many people we can deploy to Vancouver, and then where else to deploy our members so that we can still respond to any calls within our area as well. And that really is what the NCO on the road's job is to make sure that they can fill the holes, but also support where necessary, and front-end load, in this case, where we needed to have members there. And our partners at BPD did take the lead, and then, of course, with their emergency response team, and we were there to support as well.
Right. Great.
And just building perhaps on the acting chief's comments, so public affairs would play an integral role in terms of, you know, communications, if there was public safety considerations to be dealt with. And just an opportunity for me to highlight the work of our operational command center and their work in terms of communicating, you know, through our frontline officers, and communicating with our other enterprise partners to ensure that that those issues are being addressed and dealt with, and most importantly, communicated.
Right, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so they did that, and that was the letter that we got. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, they did a great job.
Yeah, and thank you for those comments, because certainly, you know, always that type of appreciation goes such a long way.
Yeah.
And then Uber, I'm going to pass it over to Deputy Chief Uber on the administrative side.
And now for the really exciting things that occur behind the scenes. Okay, so I'll begin with the support services section, which is overseen by Inspector Bryce Graham. It's a very busy section. It has a number of units within it, and that includes training, recruiting, information management, fleet, and facilities. So I'll begin with training. They conducted ARWIN training for our members, and for those that don't know, ARWIN is a less lethal launcher, which fires a variety of less lethal munitions, which includes impact batons and other munitions. Bryce, do we have that deployed in the field?
So we're just wrapping up our training right now, and we'll have it deployed either by the end of this year or early next year.
Good, thank you. And then training also planned and conducted scenario training day with the Canada Line attendants. And the scenario involved a suspicious package found by an attendant, and then that escalates after assessing it by way of the HOT principles to transit police being called. Initial response by patrol members then necessitates the need for our K-9 deployment, and then that's assessed from there. So it was a good training day for all involved. As Deputy Ferland mentioned, the joint training with our NCOs and Delta Police NCOs at the Regional Municipal Training Center, that was arranged and conducted by training, and that involved critical incident management. Training also completed the mandatory training day, day 4. That included in-class and also online training. So the in-class was virtual reality sims, leg restraints, and a K-9 presentation. And then the online included our pursuit policy, acknowledgement, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and then spit hood training and policy acknowledgement. From recruiting, conducted specific training on employee selection and interviewing. So this is a critical component for the recruiters in the recruiting unit. And we look at it and refine it as necessary and update it to ensure that we're consistent. And the session was facilitated by retired member, VPD member Glenn Burchard, who some may know he was and continues to be a polygraph examiner. We also hired 3 laterals. 2 of those were contracts. So in total for this year to date, we've hired 24 people, 17 recruits, 5 on contract, and then 2 laterals. And, you know, it's easy to say that, to summarize that, but there's so much work that goes into the recruiting and the hiring. Recruiting confirmed that we have 4 seats at the JI class in January, so that's good. Also looking at ways to advertise transit police to the outside world, so by way of social media. We looked at our website as a recruiting portal. We also held an in-person information session in this room, I believe, which was well attended by members of the public, and a lot of follow-up as a result of that. Also attended multiple community events and job fairs as well, just to help spread the word on what transit police is about. From records management, they reviewed and made changes to our 5.2 and 490 process. This is with regards to the seizure of property, just to ensure that we're in compliance. From facilities, good news, we completed phase 2 renovation at headquarters here, and as of this week, we have the occupancy permit. There's some few warranty things and additional things to be completed, but the good news is that it's now ours and we can begin moving into it. We also have received approval for renovation at our Richmond office and have received approval for small upgrades to our hub offices. Also good news from fleet, we finally started receiving our 2021 fleet order. So 3 new patrol vehicles and 2 non-patrol vehicles to be added to our fleet. From finance, so October year to date, we're now 893,000 negative variance, but we're still forecasting a 750,000 negative variance for year end due to the deferral of the CSO program and timing of benefit costs, which will also help to offset some of our costs. TransLink board has provided preliminary approval of our 2023 budget, and this is 45.8 million, which is a 12% increase over our 2022 budget. All of our asks other than headcount were approved, so that includes 12 community safety officers, 1 policy and planning advisor, 1 DEMS or digital evidence management administrator, and 1 community policing coordinator. We also have an interim financial audit with KPMG that begins this week, and we fully anticipate that that should go smoothly. From human resources, the sergeant and staff sergeant competition is now complete. There were in total 19 interviews, 19 candidates. It resulted in 5 sergeants and 5 staff sergeants being placed on the eligibility list, so eligible for promotion once a promotion or a vacancy is up. And then bargaining, HR also participated in bargaining, but I won't steal from Oscar's thunder, which is good news. That's it. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? I'm always struck by how much information you guys provide at this meeting and how many things are happening. It just sounds like such a busy, busy place. So thank you. I know everyone's working really hard. Okay. We have no more questions. To item 3, other business, and 3.3, report from the chair of the finance committee. There you are.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I guess the Q3 financial operating status report is on the consent agenda. I'm sure people have read that. If you have any questions, I can do my best to answer them, or look to the transit police executive to answer those questions. So maybe I'll just give you a minute to think about that. If not, I think what I'll do is I'll leave the rest of the report to the in-camera.
Okay. And then we'll move to the next item. Oh, sorry, does anybody have any questions? Okay. Item 3.2, then, report from the chair of the governance committee.
Just like Murray, the documentation that was item 1B in the consent agenda minutes, so the things that have been dealt with most recently. The one thing that the chief had pointed out was we're keeping an eye on how the performing the police act report consultation will be done, assuming that perhaps there will be with the superior and then change with cabinet in a couple of weeks, that maybe that process will be developed so that we'll know how transit police can be part of a subcommittee or at least provide some sort of information. So we'll just update the board.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, well, we're actually ahead of schedule. It's sort of surprising. Thank you. Anybody have anything else they want to bring in the open portion of the meeting, George?
Yeah, just in the open portion, and probably not my place, but, because I'm fairly new, but this is your last meeting as our chair in a public session, because the next one is in January, and I know we'll talk about you more probably in other meetings to come, but it's the only public session we have after almost 10 years of being on board.
A little longer, yeah.
Longer than 10 years, and the last 3 as chair. I know I've enjoyed my time, which has been fairly short with you as the chair and the work that we've done together, but I think I speak on behalf of all board, and I assume all the executive and everyone else. You talk about a lot of time and effort that goes into the work that the executive and the members do, but
in the transit board, and what you bring, Sarah, is you're so grateful of what we are doing, and as police, we don't hear a lot of that. So to have such a supportive board, and particularly a supportive chair, you come to the events, you support our membership, that is invaluable for them to see you there and our board members attending these events and what you bring. So I know from myself, from the chief, not being here, from all the executives, thank you for everything you've done.
Expecting that. I thought I could just be a little quiet. It has been a fantastic journey forward, a tremendous opportunity to learn and meet really wonderful, smart, dedicated, caring people who belie all the stereotypes that anyone could have ever held about police. And enormously challenging and interesting. And a really great honor with everybody at the Transit Police, so I'm really grateful. So thank you for your kind words. Now I'm going to go get a glass of water. If there's nothing else, then we can call this to close at 10:09, and I'll see you